Welcome to the 1 Million Years of Joy podcast. I'm Dr. Andrea Benaker, your host, and my intention is to inspire you to find more joy in your life through the stories from our guests and the science on joy and purpose. I'm delighted to introduce to you Jessica Haertel. She has had a wonderful career working with Accenture, Nestle, and Bayer in various fields. She has a passion for meaningful interactions with curious, aspirational, authentic, and driven personalities. She was born in Chile and is now living in Germany. Jessica, welcome. It's such a pleasure to have you with us today.
Thanks so much for having me. It's an honor from my end.
So Jessica, before we dive into the topic of joy, I was wondering if you can share with the audience your life journey to date. I know you were born in Chile. You're currently living in Germany. Tell us a little bit about that and maybe share a bit about your professional interests.
So, as you just mentioned, I was born in Chile, a little bit by coincidence, I would say. My parents were expatriates. They were in Chile by that time, and I guess that's the reason why my brother and myself were born there. Other siblings were born in Germany before, and years later, another set of siblings were born in Peru. So we are a very large family, and I think this is maybe my starting point for my life story is definitely being raised in a multicultural, very large family among a lot of siblings who, of course, form you from the moment you are born. I think siblings and your parents, of course, are life in a nutshell, and you get it from the moment you are on earth. So I was born in Chile. I spent a few years in between in Germany, and then we all moved back when I was 10 years old. We moved to Peru because my father was half Peruvian and he wanted to go there as an expatriate, but he wanted to retire there as well. So for us, it was like a move for good to South America. And I guess I would have stayed there forever if it wasn't for a very complicated political and socioeconomic situation that we faced there in the mid-80s that then would a little bit influence my further life path and make me definitely return to Germany and stay here and make my life and my living in Germany now.
And tell us, how many siblings do you have?
Well, we are a patchwork family, which by then wasn't so popular, but all in all, we are 9.
That's fascinating. It must be so much fun to attend family gatherings.
It means the world. I must admit, as a child, you sometimes wish to be the only one. As a grown-up, you love them for what they have taught you, for what they have gone through with you. Yeah, it's great having them all, I must say, yeah.
And tell us about your professional background. Has the fact that you've lived in various countries inspired you to pursue particular paths from a career perspective and education perspective?
Yes, definitely. Being an expatriate child myself and going very unprepared as a child, as an adolescent to Peru, ever since I felt if I'm grown up and I get the opportunity to work on the expatriation field and helping families to assimilate both coming into the country I live in or going abroad into a country they don't know, it would be my pleasure preparing them better. Not only the person that got the contract and the job, because he or she is very busy where they go to. It's the spouses. It's, I would say, as relevant is the impact that it has on children to be well prepared. And I enjoyed myself very much doing that for years with Bayer, who I would say was the greatest employer to do that. Then with Nestle and a large construction company. So that has been always my passion. And only in the last 6 or 7 years, I changed to leadership recruiting, feeling that I could remain on this connectivity with individuals, very fascinating individuals that reflect very thoroughly about their career goals and about what matters in their life, both privately and professionally, and accompany them on the way. It's no longer the cross-border assignment. It's now more the within one market or within the European community, help them to take new steps, go new paths. For me, it makes sense, both aspects. Yeah, I guess the interaction with individuals is what absolutely thrives me.
And is that a big source of joy for you? Or what is rather the biggest source of your joy?
I think the biggest source of joy is definitely not linked to job, not linked to private life, but always linked to people or situations that really touch my heart. And it happens a lot in my job as well, I must say. It's the one-to-one conversations that I have where I learn a lot about other people's life and what triggers them and also what makes them happy. That gives me joy. And in my private life, definitely learning from my children, learning from the elderly generation of my community, learning from my siblings, my age, younger, older, and friends is definitely giving me a lot of joy because I feel very blessed in the sense that I get a lot of input of joy moments that are shared with me or that I experience myself. Very unique ones, I must say.
So, Jessica, I know you've had a tremendously challenging experience while you were younger living in Peru. Can you share that experience with us, please?
Yes. Well, it actually happened when I was 17. We were by then living in Peru. And maybe to understand the situation or how it could come to that experience I made being kidnapped together with my mother and my younger brother, you have to understand the political situation that Peru was in by then. And I guess a very good understanding of what we were living is when you look at the Netflix series Pablo Escobar, which is this Medellin cartel, which is always described like a situation that only happened in Colombia. But by the mid of 80s or the 1980s, Peru was sort of the biggest planting area for the cocaine business in Medellin or going to Colombia. And it was very easy for this Pablo Escobar team or terrorism organization to step into Peru because we had the Communist Party, the Shining Path, Sendero Luminoso, who started early in the 80s. And their aim was to really destroy any governmental or political structure in Peru and make up an idea of a very communist, different world to what it was by then. And what may have started as a tiny positive idea became a huge and super aggressive and violent terroristic organization, which would not halt utilizing any means of spreading the terror and really brutally killing a lot of people. So with the infrastructure made by an organization that already worked and I would say owned the Peruvian society and had us all fearing about going out. On top of that came this Medellin cartel in really applying another level of terror and brutality to the entire country. So in those years when we were kidnapped, I must say we weren't the only ones. I guess it became sort of a popular means of getting a lot of money for the bribes they needed, for getting people out of jail. So there was a huge demand for money, and kidnapping was a very famous and for them easy one to fulfill. So in worst case, you would kill the people you kidnap. In best case, you got some money. So for them and on the personalities they were, your life didn't count. So the moment when we were captured, and I was 17, I was really like flowing around with my thoughts. I wasn't aware of the gravity of the situation, but my mother immediately reacted well in understanding that we were worth nothing. The only thing that we counted for was the ransom that we would be the equivalent of. She really managed the situation in a sense that what were our roles? When we got kidnapped, you need to understand there's something you need to do if you want to survive. And she started to become the person interacting with these really cruel and violent men to make sure that there is a ransom amount set up, whom to discuss that with from the outside, because normally it's not your family you can call on because they are in panic, they are shocked, they don't know if you live, if you were killed in between. So she really took an active role And all that, you could tell 1,000 stories on horrible moments, on shocking moments. But what made this situation, after all, my first true image of a totally unexpected joy moment. And that forms you, like these moments where you think everything is lost and you come to experience joy, was the moment that I realized my mother managed to have them confess with her. And it's an amazing story. While talking about the ransom and while talking about, well, all kinds of were to deliver us if the money was paid, or if they would or not be killing us. I assume, I wasn't there, but I assume what she told them is that there was hope for them. And it's so unbelievable because you normally don't speak to them like that. And it wasn't this Stockholm syndrome either. It wasn't that she was falling for their cause or me or my younger brother. The cause was never to be forgiven, and their behavior was never to be forgiven. But what my mother managed to tell them, we judged by human eyes. It was my judgment, my mother's judgment, and society, for sure society as well. But she sort of opened the eyes to them that we are not always and ever judged just by society, because the rules, the ethics, what is good, what is bad, what is the right thing to do, pretty much depend on where you were raised, on your social economic surrounding, on what you have learned, what you have gone through in your life, to see that they might have a different perception. And they started telling their stories to my mother. And I would say 3/4 of them, like 8 out of 12 men, were born on the street. They were raised on the street. No siblings, no parents. They were forced to start robbing, stealing, even killing by the age of 6 or 7. And I guess they gave up on believing there was any hope for them, or any joy for them, or any forgiveness for them. And I really, as unbelievable as it sounds, when they all of a sudden started crying with my mom, like grown up, aggressive man, crying in front of the person they kidnapped, saying, "Do you really believe that I might be forgiven someday?" It was like an unexpected joy. It was not the joy that you feel like a nice music or a nice dinner with friends. That is joy, definitely. But joy is also when you feel like all in you, all, absolutely every cell of you is touched by what you are experiencing right now. And by realizing that in this situation, there was an opening for choice, for those individuals to make a choice and to say, there's hope for me. Maybe I will not experience it, but at least I see the chance. There is a chance to decide I'm not evil because I was born evil. Life has made me evil. And that also teaches me, and it definitely taught my mother, that you need to be very careful on judging the easy life, the easy fun, the easy choices you can make versus heartfelt choices of those who never had them before. And this was a moment of absolute joy, I would say, even in that very peculiar place, and even without knowing if we would leave there alive or not. But that really was the beginning for me to seek into what goes beyond, what goes deeper, what lies behind a human being, what you can't see, but what is so relevant to understand the entire personality of that person.
Wow, Jessica, this is so moving and such an incredible story that you have shared. Thank you for your authenticity. Were you involved in those conversations where your mother was speaking with the individuals, or were you in a separate room? I'm just trying to understand what was going through your mind as you were isolated and wondering, well, what's going to be happening here? And just tell us a little bit about that reality, and also how long was the total experience for?
Well, the total length were 10 days. And as you said, my mother gave clear role indications, what she would cover and what I was supposed to do. And I mean, I was 17. I was a blonde girl in South America. I was by then modeling for some commercials in TV. So honestly, the chances to be raped were 150%. Or the chances of something horrible happening to me or my brother were absolutely real. And what my mother said, you stay in the room, you watch after your brother. He was 6 and he was really not doing well psychologically. So my mother said, you stay there, you just try to be as invisible as possible, to not provoke any of the men, when they get bored, when they look their very aggressive TV movies, when they drink a lot, and they were very violent out there. They were in a little bit larger room, and we had the one, you would call it a dormitory, but it was just one bed for the three of us. So I stayed most of the time there. They would give us some food, some very basic food and water. And my mother said, you don't take water to wash your face. You don't wash. You don't do anything. The aim is to be as invisible and, to some extent, as smelly as whatever you can to not create any thoughts on them. Mm-hmm. And she said, I will, whatever discussion we have, and that was something she asked from them. She said, I will be your counterpart. I will organize the entire communication with the outside world. I know you want to achieve something. I will help you to get there. But for that, my ask is all this happens outside of this room. Mm-hmm. And that was definitely to protect my brother and me. So she would leave hours and hours, and I was really, really scared because I didn't know what was happening. I mean, when they were loud outside, my mother would be in the room and they were drinking, watching terror films, whatever. But when she was out, it was always very silent, and that really scared me a lot. So one day when my little brother was sleeping, I felt like I need to open the door. I need to understand what is happening outside. And that was the moment I really saw her sitting on one side of a table, a very small wooden table, and a man sitting opposite to her, and the other ones queuing up on the back of that man sitting in front of her. And she was holding his hands and he was crying like a baby. And I was like, wow, what is happening there? It was like, I didn't understand anything at all. And I felt like, if they see me now, them sobbing like children, that will not be good. So I tried to close the door, and I was waiting for my mother to come back much later. And I pretended I was sleeping, and she said, I know you're not sleeping. What you just said is something incredible, even for me. I don't know how I came to have such a role in their life, but I can tell you, we are not to blame them on what their life has been up to this moment in time. And then she said they were confessing, they were telling their life stories. Yeah, of course, they were crying for their mothers as well, that sometimes never was there for them. I mean, some of them would know their parents, others definitely were born on the street and left there. So this was absolutely amazing to me. But my role was really to stay in the room and not get out.
And how did the final transaction, if you wish, of liberating you and paying the ransom work out? And was your mother feeling confident about the positive outcome?
She said if it was for the 8 ones that confessed with her, she was very positive. They would protect us to some extent. But there were 4 others that were they were super violent. They were people like Pablo Escobar and his crew. And on them, she had no idea what would happen. And actually, it took 2 attempts, and only on a 3rd one were we released, because the first 2 ones, of course, an international company paying that ransom. And it was based on my father's role by them that we got kidnapped to start with. So it was the company paying for that. They want the police or Scotland Yard or one of these organizations working alongside to make sure that if you pay, you get the people out and alive. So it was super complicated. And I understand that the first 2 opportunities where we were due to be exchanged for the ransom, it didn't work out because the person wasn't there, or because our kidnappers felt there were too much police around. And then the 2 times they came back and they really said, no, we are going to kill you. And that's another experience. I mean, when you're 17, you're supposed not to die. And maybe it was the luxury of having such a mother on my side. But when she said, okay, I don't know if we are going to make it out of this one, I felt a total peace at heart, because that's another one. You have to know when you have choices, and you absolutely, your gut feeling, your intuition will tell you when you have no choices. And then comes acceptance. And that is, I mean, I'm happy I'm here today, but it was such an experience for a 17-year-old to say, okay, if that is what it is, I give in, I accept it. And she did the same thing. And for some reason, I don't know what the reason was, that ultimately they didn't come into the room and shoot us all. For some reason, they kept the patience. Maybe it was the 8 guys trying to defend us. I don't know. But then on the 3rd attempt, it worked out. And they really said, okay, we received the money. It was not an exchange by the same time. They would have the money already, and then they put us into a car. I guess we were kidnapped into a slum just on the outside of Lima, the capital city. So we weren't far away, but they put us into the car. We had like the eyes folded, and we were just dropped out of a car somewhere in this slum. And they said, okay, you are supposed to remain seated here with your eyes blinded and count to 100 or something like that. And you have to wait because we have told your family where to pick you up. And we were really supposed to do that. So they left us in the middle of the street. We heard a lot of noises, like people, animals, cars, lights. But the amazing thing in the 80s, no one would care because you weren't the only one being kidnapped, and you wouldn't want to get involved into a kidnapping because you didn't know what could happen to you and your family. So even if you are aware something horrible is happening, there wasn't too much involvement of people surrounding you, to be honest. So we were sitting there and the car took off and left. And we were we were crying. We were so relieved. And all of a sudden, this car comes back and we felt like, okay, we made it until the street. We made it to be free. And then all of a sudden, they come back and they got out of the car and we felt like, okay, now we're done. And they just came back to say to my mother, they said, we have never come across a woman like you. And if we are to die within the next month or year, we will always remember that you were the first and maybe the only and last one, even giving us hope that there is an opportunity for us. And that was, they said that, they thanked her and they left. And then we got relieved from or picked up by our family. And ultimately, they all died. We saw them in the newspaper over the following month on page 1, on page 2. And as situation became worse and worse, it wasn't a big news any longer. And ultimately, you would find their faces lying on the street on page 11 or 12. It became like a daily thing of people being kidnapped or kidnappers being killed. But I'm very certain they would always remember my mother in their very last moment. And that is another joy or gratitude I feel having been raised by such a woman, I must say.
Thank you so much for sharing. That is incredible. And indeed, your mother, an absolute inspiration. So thank you for sharing such a deeply profound story. And after living such an experience that is so profound, tell us how life was for you after, in the days and the weeks and the months that followed.
Well, I think the normal reaction is you should be grateful you are alive. You should be grateful your mother saved us all to some extent and saved the family, because if it would have happened or ended differently, I guess my family would have been destroyed to some extent. But again, I was 17. I guess my anger, my anxiety, my fears really came up right after. And the funny thing was we were supposed to leave the country. We were really forced by Scotland Yard were the ones helping us on this exchange. And they said, you can't stay in the country because they know you. So if anything comes up or any person gets caught by the police, they will always say you said something you were not supposed to share. So we had to leave the country, and my parents decided to go to Disneyland. I'm sorry, I need to laugh about that. I still need to laugh about that because I felt it was the last place I wanted to go. It was Miami and Disneyland. It was good for my younger brother. For him, it was like exchanging memories of bad people, bad noises, bad atmosphere with Mickey Mouse and you name it. But for me, it was like, I was so upset. So I spent the following weeks and I would say even months, of course, scared of crossing paths with them again, or also this post experience of facing death and accepting it. But then when you're out, you feel like that was a lot of energy and you need to assimilate what you have lived. And that took me a little while, I must say. It didn't change my life because ultimately, I still believe I won so much more through that experience than I lost. That the balance of my gratitude or of my privilege of having witnessed a lot of situations with other people, with myself, learning a lot about life, myself, opportunities, chances, choices. I value it so much higher than any depressing or negative experience, I must say.
And how does joy feel today after so many years of going through such an experience?
Well, I think to some extent it never changed. It just, I got the opportunity to sense my connecting with joy very early. But a few situations in my life coming afterwards showed me that joy can be the very easy thing of walking in the forest and being so grateful for the country I live in, for the freedom I have as a woman in 2023, of having healthy kids, of having a good job. So all that leads to gratitude/joy. But it also comes to moments where instead of being sadness in the interaction with other human beings, you sense joy, like with the elderly people. That's something I told you when we exchanged
Yes.
messages. It's sometimes it's just holding a hand. It's just caressing a very old hand that tells you, no one has touched me in weeks. Or if they touched me, it was just to take care of some physiological needs, but not to take you by the hands and take you by the heart. This song that says it's not taking by the hand, it's taking by the heart. And I guess that is a repeated situation that I'm very lucky to experience quite often. That with children, with young adults, with old people, it's joy is everywhere.
And do you see a difference between joy and happiness?
Yeah, I think the happiness is maybe on the long run. Like happiness is something that a situation or a life surrounding can bring, versus joy for me is really the moment when you feel totally overwhelmed by, it could be a song trespassing you in time and space to people that are no longer there. It could be the wisdom of a very old person, but it's punctual. For me, joy is not a feeling of consumption, like I want joy, I need joy to activate me. It's not this dopamine kind of thing. It's real. And joy happens in reality only. That's another point that is important to me. It doesn't happen honestly on social media. It doesn't happen on Insta. It is, for me, it's you and me speaking or listening to whatever generation that surrounds me. That gives me joy. And that is always linked to a real moment and a real place.
And how do you bring joy to others?
I think by trying to really understand what their needs are for them to experience joy. And it is very different. I mean, if I speak to my nephews, they are like 8 and 10. Bringing joy to them is to watch their soccer videos and say, wow, you rocked it. Yeah. This is like, wow, okay. Over there in Germany, someone says, I play like a rock star. That is giving joy to a young boy. But giving joy to an older person is maybe taking them out of where they live and just do a walk with them, or they were dreaming of having some particular dish once before they die. And you take them out to a restaurant and you know they will eat 2 bites maybe because they don't have that hunger anymore. But it was a dream they had to one more time eating that particular pancake or whatever it is. It's sometimes very simple things, right? And with young adolescents, maybe my job from recruiting teaches me a little bit on what are your aspirations? What do you really want to do? Is that all you want? Is that your horizon? Is that your ambition? And not that I question mark that. It's not on me, but just opening up the conversation, taking their eyes away from screen and really to an eye-to-eye contact and saying, what do you really want in life? And I guess from the feedback that I get is that it works. I think it works. Giving joy and sharing joy, if you are a person that lives in joy, is a very natural thing. It's not a talent or a to-do or an approach, a strategy. It's like being touched by others, I guess. That makes it very easy to connect on mutual joy.
Thank you for sharing that. And with such an incredible woman as your mother in your life, how has that inspired you as a mother for your own children?
Well, I think of course, she's my role model. Definitely she is. Ask my daughter if she's always happy about that. I don't know. But yeah, I know that at least what my daughter tells me is that I live the example of you don't have to remain in a situation that is not healthy for you. You don't have to give in just because everyone else says this is the right thing to do. You have to maintain your intuition to understand why does a person react the way he or she does? What is the background to it? Be empathic, remain not on the helping side in the negative sense, like I help you, I'm so good, but understand where there's a need and a demand and be open for that. Receive that vibe of interaction. And I would say she's really cool on that. She's young, but she stands up for what she believes in, and she stands up for others, even if it costs her a little of sympathies on peer group. But I admire that, and I'm very proud of her, I must say. And I think it's not only my teaching her as a mother, but also the genes. I guess we have very strong genes. At least that's what my husband says.
And talking about the younger generation and the future, what do you think we need to do collectively to bring more joy to this world?
I would always encourage each of us, no matter what generation, try to find one peer of the other generations. If you are a young child, and that's what I tried with my kids as well, try to give them mentors at hands that are not mother and father, because you become uncool in a certain age and they need to differentiate from you. But what they definitely need, especially in those years where they don't really know what they want and who they are, give them mentors, other adults that qualify much cooler than you, that share some dreams, that can add like role models that on one hand for the younger ones. And what we did in the church that I'm active in, we also connected young adolescent boys and girls with the older generation. And the older generation would open up their doors, their homes, to invite them to come and ask whatever questions they had. And of course, it always started, have you been in World War II or things like that? But then what the elderly generation told me, it always went to, I don't know what to do. I don't know. It's so much input that I get, how to navigate through that. And with these old people, I mean, they have seen it all. Life is changing, technology is changing, but ultimately the human values haven't. So having this inner peace of having seen it all going around and around and around, they can give very good advice. So this interconnectivity of generation is super important for me. And I would always encourage every generation to seek for these other, the young, the middle-aged like myself, and the old ones. Try to get a network, including every one of them. Diversity is fine, on ethnicity, all that you want, but it's also an age thing. It's also this cross-generational interaction that to me would really make this world a better place.
And I agree so much with what you've just shared. It's so essential. And we all have such incredible journeys. You know, we experience life in unique ways. And even just having that opportunity to connect and share those stories, learn from each other, it's so valuable. And in fact, there's extensive research on this, on the importance of relationships in our lives, how they fuel actually our health, our longevity, and our mental power. So the advice you've just given is really wonderful. Thank you.
At least it nurtures me, I must say. I really feel blessed for these interactions, yes.
If there would be 5 words that you would use to describe yourself, what would they be?
I would start with, I'm definitely a grateful person. I'm grateful, I admit, for that experience and for others that I had in my life. I'm a seeker. I don't know if I have chosen to be a seeker or I was called to be a seeker, but I really want to understand life in depth and situations in depth. For that, I consider myself also brave because, by now I know you have to go through it. There are no bypasses on situations that you don't like. It's just going through them, and there's always a tomorrow. It's always the next morning, and you always get out of it. I think I'm very spiritual, but this is what life has shown me. I really saw the wonders in my life, and always adding up something that is not a good quality. I'm definitely impatient. I'm a very impatient person that you can ask anyone on, and it's an impatience that arises from people that in my eyes do not consider the luxury and the outstanding opportunities they are given for their own lives and also to add to the life of others. And again, I'm no one to judge any other life, but I know I'm impatient on that one. So this is me in 5 words.
So I want to go back to the seeker definition that you just shared with us. And many years ago, a friend of the family who was over 90 years old, when I asked him, what have been some of the key lessons that you've learned in this lifetime? He said, well, I've realized that the more we advance in age, the more questions we have and the less answers we find. I'm curious to get your view as a final question. Is this how you feel in that quest for seeking meaning and joy in life?
Yeah, I think that's a very wise answer you had received by them. And I guess I would totally agree on it, with a difference to say the older I get and the more I seek, the less I care for the answers. It's like knowing the questions will bring me to an answer. So it's a confidence, a trust that whatever is to happen is to happen. That's what I meant when I think and I truly believe life is spinning around. I am a participant, I'm a guest, I'm welcome, but I'm just one tiny little part of it. And the rest just continues its flow. So the questions I have, they will find answers. If I like them or not, I don't know, but it doesn't matter. It's just keeping your mind curious and open to see what life is giving you, is granting you, is showing you. That for me becomes more and more relevant, not the answers, because the answers will come or they will not come. I mind less and less, I would say.
So on these wise words of embracing the mystery of life, I just want to say a big thank you for taking the time to be with us today and for sharing your story. It's been an absolute delight. Thank you immensely, Jessica.
It was my delight. Thanks. And I'm very grateful you took the time and listened to that story. Thanks so much.
Thank you.